You're listening to the Lifetime Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, John Zombro. This is episode number 108, and today's title is Lift, Sprint, Eat, and Sleep with an exclamation point. So I've got a guy here with me, and I think many or most of you know this guy. He's the co-host of the show. He's also the mystery man because lately, and this is a true story, PK, a few ladies have been asking me, who is this PK? I love his voice.
John, respectfully, I do not believe you, but we'll just keep it mysterious.
Yeah, and none of these gals look like Eddie Vedder, but if any of them did, they would say, I seem to recognize your face.
This is an ambush this morning. Good morning.
Good morning to you, man. You're awesome. And hey, guys, listeners, this wonderful audience that we have, you are awesome too. And as you know, the Lifetime Athlete is the home of Hard to Kill, the Hard to Kill workshop, where you learn to use the 5-3-1 Lifetime Athlete system to dilate healthy and fast. So thank you for being with us and for helping us to build this wonderful peak performance, high achievement, kick-ass community. And I want to say that I know you are here because you embrace your inner athlete and you're motivated to stay athletic through your entire life, whether that's crushing a goal in sports, shredding for the wedding, rocking the reunion as in high school or otherwise, or playing with the grandkids. You know that an athletic and agile body, also mind and spirit, are the key to life best lived.
Absolutely. Bravo, JC. Good intro.
I felt that may have been one of my better introductions, if I say so myself humbly.
I think so. Almost demure in your composition. Yeah. So in today's episode, Lift, Sprint, Eat, and Sleep, how did we get here today? What's been happening in your life?
So I don't know that I've mentioned this on the show before, and I don't think so, but I had recently written an article for the Costco Connection magazine. It was published in the January issue regarding movement and using the model that I've developed from the literature. Some of the listeners are going to be familiar with. Then what was really cool, that was fun, and I have some other magazine work ongoing, but I received a personal letter from Sharon Dunn, who's the president of the American Physical Therapy Association, who had read the article. And then, of course, in vetting me, she found my PT Basics series that we've done on this podcast and responded to me. So she thanked me in this personal letter for encouraging Americans to move appropriately and for being a lifelong advocate for the physical therapy profession. So that was really, it felt good. I'm proud of that and inspired to keep holding up this torch and leading the charge to better health and performance for everyone.
John, that's fantastic. That just means that your work reached, imagine if it, reached her, it was a whole new avenue or channel to connect with new readers and movers out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm just so grateful and thankful to be able to do this and certainly hoping to reach more people with messages that can empower them. And I guess another message, we've had some, less than bright moments in history lately. And, I'm incredibly sad about the recent loss of rock and roll drum legend Neil Peart of Rush. Who recently passed away at the all too young age of 68. And so I'd like to dedicate today's show to Neil.
Yeah, R.I.P. Was he, I am not as familiar with the Rush catalog as you. Was he a legendary drummer kind of a guy?
Oh, absolutely. I think in most people's lists, top 5 or top 10 ever. And that's probably across all music, not just rock and roll.
That is too soon. 68. No, that's not good.
Yeah. So again, we salute you, Neil, for all of your work and inspiration, and definitely rest in peace.
All right, John.
PK.
Springboarding off of that somber moment, what are we talking about today?
That was partly a sip of my delicious coffee, but also just a kind of a pause to try to frame this, because this topic that, today's title, lift, sprint, eat, sleep, we've bounced around on these things before and similar things, and I would say this. Actually, I sound like there's a Phil Hartman Saturday Night Live skit. I'm just a caveman lawyer and I don't know much, but I do know this. That's what I felt like right there. So there are a number of lists out there, for great living, or for checking off the boxes for health, or for let's say fitness, or sports performance. And we know these, we've seen them, and most of them have 10 or 20 components. So I actually agree with most of them. I've come up with some myself, but many of my clients will ask me for the big rocks. They're saying, okay, well, what they're not saying, what they're helping me to realize, is that if we look at short-term memory, we know that the short-term memory can process maybe up to 5 plus or minus 2 items. At least that's what the literature says. In my case, I'm probably the -2. 3 seems to be about right, but that's why I came up with 4 for this list. And so what I wanted to do was give our lifetime athletes a picture of the ones that possibly matter most. So it's the short list. And the reason for this, again, people, humans, we all, we can be overwhelmed in this modern era by volume and complexity. So many, many times my athletes will ask for less. Just don't give me more information on how to crush goals. Just give me, the main things so I can get most of the way there. So to be clear, when I say lift, sprint, eat, and sleep will get you most of the benefits, I'm not saying that training for mobility and aerobic fitness, having mindfulness and gratitude practices, getting adequate sunlight, and all the other components of healthy, high-performing living are not valuable. I'm just saying that the 4 we're going to discuss today are probably the most important, at least in my humble and honest opinion.
John, I think that's so interesting. Well, first of all, that is a very that hits home. That distill it down, explain it to me, give me the high points, and let me start there. So that's I think a very familiar experience for me. But I also think it's interesting that how many different little qualifiers that you put in there, just to be respectful of other philosophies and schools of thought and perspectives. But I just want to push back a small bit and say, if I had to say to you that these are the most important, not even probably the most important, would you say that that's where you get started? If someone said, hey, you can only tell me 4 things, what would you there's only 4 spaces, is this where you would start?
Yes, and particularly in the concept or the capacities of the motivated athlete.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, this is my top 4. These are the ones that through my work and my experience, I feel are the most important to get started. We may disagree, but this is planting your flag in the ground. And I think that being respectful of someone who thinks differently doesn't have to lessen your conviction in what you think is right.
Yeah, and I'd say this flag is definitely supported by the literature, but is certainly driven by, as you said, my experience and my opinion.
Mm, mm. I tell you what, I am thirsty for more. So uh, let's get into it. Let's start with number 1, lift.
I picked that because it's a 4-letter word. And so, I didn't say resistance training, but really that's what we're talking about here. So, lifting can obviously be lifting weights or heavy objects or different things like that, but also it includes, sometimes the use of machines and body weight movements and all of that. So we're really talking about, um, I'll use quotes here, gym work. Although some people will say, "Well, I don't do that in the gym. I do it in the park, or I do it in my garage." Okay, yes, I mean exactly that. But those kinds of exercises that help to, um, work and develop and maintain our muscles and our ideal movement capacities and functions.
Mm, Indeed.
So because muscle drives the machine, the human beast, it doesn't get from A to B without muscle. You can have all the motivation in the world, all the, the cognitive desire and all the blood supply, but ultimately it's the muscles that move the skeleton. And so, this is kind of a duh, it's basic, but yeah, okay, that makes sense. Well, interesting enough, muscles are, they essentially function like an organ. So they're the largest organ that we have in the body.
Absolutely.
One of the things that muscles do, among many, is they are key metabolic regulators. So, the presence of muscle helps us to manage our blood sugar levels. To put it simply, the muscles, especially in the athletic individual, are very efficient at taking up and utilizing glucose as an energy source. When we're not using fat for fuel, but also in helping us to get rid of excess blood sugar in those times when maybe we had the indulgence at Baskin Robbins or wherever, and so an athletic muscular beast is going to be less impacted metabolically by that double dipper because of the muscle.
That's an interesting connection. And I think that it's an important one that you have made many times. But, specifically revisiting it, I think it's important. You talk about lifting, you talk about muscle, you talk about that largest organ, but it is interconnected with one of the major factors in terms of high performance. And this is what we consume with our nutrition and the regulation of the blood sugar, the insulin, etc., is another component. So I just think that making that connection between pumping iron and muscle and then how it actually helps your body process the nutrients or byproduct of what we consume is a very real thing that that's a connection that is not often made.
Yeah, and so muscle, obviously, it drives the machine, it moves the human. It's this organ that helps us to maintain metabolic homeostasis, if you like that term. And then also, any person who says, past the age of blank, and the literature suggests it's probably in the late 20s when we start to see, muscle mass starting to be lost. Again, that can vary, how much a person's training and also some genetic factors push that out a little further. But nonetheless, we have to fight the reaper in terms of sarcopenia or muscle loss, because the ability to keep having high performance in the later decades is extremely strongly linked to having your muscle mass. And so not only do we say, gosh, we want that, we want to do lifting and resistance training to build the muscle for fall prevention and long-term health and all of that, but really it's just also the key to performance.
Hmm. Interesting. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so now with lifting, and I'm going to use lifting again. You can say resistance training if you want, but
Sure.
I do have a bias that I think actually using some amount of iron is of great value. I think we always want to discuss that whole concept of functionality with training, but nonetheless, lifting, it's the one training mode that does it all.
And when you say does it all, break that down for me.
Yeah, so this is something we've alluded to before, just kind of coming back to it and say, well, if you're looking at only doing aerobic exercise or only doing mobility training, or again, you can start build that whole list out. We don't have to for today. Well, weight training or resistance training actually, if it can do it all. So in other words, yeah, we get the muscle strengthening, but we can do it in such a way that we get a high intensity effect, we can get a max velocity effect, we can get a mobility effect, we can even get a cardiovascular training effect. So that's the beauty of, let's say, it sounds good to say the beauty of the barbell, but it could be anything. The other modes of exercise don't have the potential to give you it all like lifting does.
Yes, and I think that that's an interesting point. And let's say that we add some of the other practices that you may have and compare it to what lifting will get you.
Yeah, precisely. So again, a couple ways of looking at this. If you have a primary sport, obviously we want to have most of your training be in that sport. but doing the lifting keeps that body shored up so that you can keep absorbing and doing your specific training. And if you don't do the muscle preserving lifting and resistance training, ultimately the beast fails. And so that's what we want to just try to bring out. And so I say, like, nothing is uh, good, bad, wrong, or right. These are all just choices that we make, and certainly we respect everyone's choices. But yoga, for example, or ultra marathon running alone won't get the job done, because those activities have wonderful attributes, but they don't have the ability to work on max velocity or so forth, so on. Each those are specific sports, and so we've got to get our yogis and our ultra runners also under the barbell a little bit, and that's really all I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You know, you got to lift.
You got to lift. I think, and that's one thing that again, you've seen it through your experience, but it's represented in the literature. It's empirically a fact. Lifting can get you some of the benefits of, let's say, yoga, and yoga cannot get you all the benefits of resistance training or lifting. It's a fact.
Yeah, precisely. And again, sometimes, I've talked about this before, about be careful making your exercise choice into a religion or a camp, and really defending it emotionally and getting all pissed off. That's not really what I'm about here. But, like, anyone who enjoys doing whatever, yoga or ultra running, not necessarily say that those are the only examples. Even like powerlifting, powerlifting, if you do it strictly, you might not be getting, say, all the aerobic fitness that one might need for long-term health. So again, it goes different ways, but everybody needs to get some amount of this muscle enhancing resistance training.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about sprinting then. That's number 2 on this list of 4.
Well, that's near and dear to me. But this is not my bias. This is really what is recognized in the physical preparation community, the strength and conditioning, speed development, sports enhancement, whatever words that you want to use. And yet, this is by far the biggest pushback. Immediately when a slide comes up and it has the word sprint, or it has a picture of a person sprinting, um, you know, uh, there'll be mumbling and different sorts of things. And so, first of all, I say, well, we have to define this. But when you look at maximum velocity movement, so, okay, could be sprinting via running, but it could also be other means. This is the fountain and the representation of youthfulness in the human.
No doubt, no question.
So naturally, evolutionarily, genetically, it's wired into the human beast. We are designed to be able to move quickly on occasion. Uh, I think that's really nothing that anyone would argue with, just from a common sense perspective. Well, it goes away in a lot of people because we give it up. Yeah, it's not like really the man's taking it away. It's like you're giving it up. You're not preserving it. And society sort of says, hey, you know, uh, you get older, and you don't want to be playful and quick moving anymore because you have to be serious. And it's like, well, that's not true at all. Athleticism is speed. And there's a great famous track coach used to be at Stanford, Brooks Johnson, and he would always have this response to people who were against the training of speed in athletes, because they would say speed kills, and then he would say, yeah, speed kills anybody who doesn't have it.
Hmm.
And
Well, John, I think that it's also been baked into our culture where, as you become an elder, you want to actually get in a position where you don't have to move as much. I mean, like the 50s, 60s ranch home where you don't want any steps, and in your actual home, you want to create a physical environment that's actually easier, and that represents success. Some of this is just, we've been thinking about it in terms of, I don't want to move as much. I want to take it easier on my body as it ages, because that's what I need to do to preserve the, I mean, I guess quality of life is how it would be phrased. Certainly that's not how we see it here, but in some ways it's been a goal to move less. Sprinting means that you're just not doing it right.
And it's the most fun of all the movements that we have. Just going fast is exhilarating, and so I want to give some examples.
Mhm.
Um, you don't miss speed until you need it. And so let's look at that
Mhm.
from an ancestral perspective first. And it's always the good joke is, everybody's hanging around the fire and in rolls the saber tooth. And so she who has speed survives. And he who stands up and says, I will not go fast because I am a cyclist, or whatever they're going to say. I'm not picking on cyclists necessarily, but guess what? That's not in the gene pool anymore. So because that's saber tooth chow. Um, but then if we come into the modern era, we say, well, okay, let's look at let's just say Joe, like Jimi Hendrix. Hey, Joe. Joe is playing rec league ball, and all of a sudden, okay, so let's say, he's 50, and he used to have this move where, generally he's going to go to his right. Everybody knows that about Joe, but he's got a couple of quick steps, and then he's getting to the hoop. He's doing a layup. All of a sudden, last couple of years, Joe's lost his speed, and he can't use that move anymore. So he's just getting the crap beat out of him on the court, and he's not happy about it. So okay, well there's an example of speed's not there. Another one. Let's say you have a mailbox across on the opposite side of the street. So you go over, you get your mail, you're kind of focused on looking at, whatever the junk mail or the bill or whatever, and you turn around, don't see the bus coming, but you go to turn on the jets and there ain't no jets. And so unfortunately, there's a statistic.
Right, right. I think that I like that second scenario just because think about, you're crossing a busy street in a city on vacation, and it changes from walk to don't walk, and you gotta, give yourself a 30-yard sprint across there. I mean, I think it is, we encounter it even in our modern age, and I think that super high intensity at maximum velocity, it's going to, we're going to encounter it. I mean, think about it's a small movement, you may push back on me here, but the dynamic sort of pull that you need to start your lawnmower sometimes, and to repeat that, it might be 50 seconds where you're just giving it all you got. That's a sprint, and that's just everyday life, just trying to get some chores done.
Yeah, totally. And I think that fits well into this idea that, okay, not everybody can do running type sprinting, but they might be able to do it on a bike or in a pool, or, with like a variation of a clean with the barbell. That's, it's a speed
Sure.
movement. Starting the lawnmower, different things that you have to, just daily tasks where actually your ability to recruit those fast twitch fibers needs to be there. And we need to keep it trained, although it doesn't require too much frequency to stay in the system. That's important, and there are even some thought leaders that this is a strong statement, but they will suggest that we might be dumbing down our movement gene pool as modern humans because we're just not using explosive capacity enough in the population. And so, essentially that's an epigenetic influence. Over enough generations, humans can devolve.
Oh, there's no question. That seems very plausible that could be and is potentially happening
Yeah, I
for
mean,
a complete novice like myself who's not a scientist,
yeah,
right?
well, and I wouldn't even consider myself a scientist. I like to study the science, but I don't necessarily, create it. But last point on sprinting is that, it can be done safely, but it must be done intelligently. And what I mean by that is, you got to work up to that. And one of the statements that we have made here a few times is you have to earn the right to train. And so it's
Mm.
totally inappropriate for people who haven't gotten to that baseline level to get into a progressive program to start doing max velocity work. Um, yet they need to do it. They just need to do it right. And so, I don't want to encourage anyone to be an idiot and just, so I haven't done anything. And so I'm just going to get off the couch and just go blast it. And you're probably going to get hurt. And I don't want that. So obviously we have science, but we also have common sense.
Absolutely. And just to be clear, you're saying this is number 2 on the list of 4. You got, if you want to peak perform at any age, gotta sprint.
Yeah, yeah, gotta maintain speed capacity in the human beast. And I see folks that they are, in our community, we have a lot of people who do, endurance-based activities. So they might be uh, cyclists or uh, runners of different, pursuing different distances, or Nordic skiers. There's a lot of that, and those are great activities. But some of, not so much the high level athletes know this, and they have had good coaching, so they know to do speed, because that's one of the things that makes them high level. But a lot of our mid level or recreational folks, they kind of get into the building the aerobic volume, and that's very important, but they eschew this other stuff because they don't, either they don't like it, they fear it, they haven't had the proper coaching or exposure to it. Well, really, they're missing out on so much of their potential, just by training that whole mechanical side of the
Hmm.
beast.
John, well said. Well said. Let's move on to the number 3 item on this list of 4. Eat.
Yeah, eat. I'm trying to use short words there, but consume food, right? And so uh, that seems like this is Captain Obvious, but um, probably the greatest rabbit hole we have in health today, is the whole concept of diet, and all the science that's going on, all the arguing, the name calling, the debating. Or right now we've got quite a bit of things going on in the major media platforms with people having just outright battles about food. And so I don't want to go too far down the road. I just say, well, my philosophy is, of course, it's the PBD, JERF, ET kind of thing. So obviously eat the plant-based diet that looks like it came from planet Earth. That's based on the JERF principle, just eat real food, and avoid the ET, the evil triad, the 3 things, which are the, high volumes of sugars, the processed, grains and starches, and also the seed oil. So, okay, everybody knows that. But really, if we get to the topic for high performing athletes, eat enough protein.
Eat enough protein. Okay, break that down for me.
Yeah. So protein, right away, even a lot of athletic people will say, that's for meatheads. And, I'm just going to eat a low protein diet. I've got lots of reasons why I don't want to eat either protein as a macro or certain types of protein for different reasons. Though some of those are to be respected, of course, but protein is not just to build tissue. It's not just for bodybuilders. Every human, but also every athletic person, needs to consume protein on a high regular basis, for the most part, to repair and optimize their tissues.
Interesting. Okay, talk to me about that.
So we've talked about the other macronutrients. So in addition to protein, we have fat and carbohydrate. Well, those things can be
Hmm.
debated. Well, do you want to have a high fat, low carb diet, or a low carb, high fat diet? Both of those things can work in different contexts, depending on, let's say, the athlete, the genetics, the variables there, the exact types of foods one's eating within that category. Pretty new research is fairly strong to say, well, that whole the zone model, where it's a mixed, moderately high amount of fat and carbs, that's not so good, because it causes metabolic confusion in the body, and something known as the Randall cycle is involved in this. And I won't get into that today, but nonetheless, you can say, I'm going to do high fat, low carb, or you can say, I'm going to do low carb, high fat, and there's a way to make that work. But the best research says you can't debate protein. You got to have it. You can't do a low protein diet and be a maximally healthy, high performing athletic human.
Right. I mean, I think that that's just, again, putting your flag in the ground. That's just a reality.
Yeah, and so the protein has to be complete, in other words, or in effect, containing all the essential amino acids, and especially the amino acid leucine, as we're talking about um, uh, uh, tissue repair and the concept of muscle protein synthesis. And so, that what that leucine does is it helps to trigger that effect. And then another amino acid, glycine, is very much related to, say, like collagen production and other connective tissues. But basically, we've got to eat these high quality complete proteins to get those things in the proper amounts.
Hmm.
And so, using big rock theory, short term memory theory, today, again, the literature is it's always going to express things in a range, and there are contexts and caveats based on who we're talking about. But a gram of protein per pound of body weight is probably a very reasonable target for most athletic people. Now, as you know, I like to think in the grams per kilogram world, because more of the literature
Hmm.
just talks in worldwide in terms of like kilograms. So I'll think about that. But I'm doing it today in pounds because I think that's what people want. I don't want to use 2.2. Just give me give me the okay. So it's easy. If you weigh, I weigh 170 pounds right now. So I should be eating, give or take, 170 grams of protein per day to really support my training and tissue turnover needs.
Okay. Okay. And I mean, I like that. Just keep it simple, right?
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of myths and misconceptions out there about risks of consuming protein. There's, certainly talks about, it has negative impacts on kidney function, for example. And uh, in all but the most extreme cases, that's not true. It's not been proven. In the best RCTs, randomized controlled trials on humans, shows the opposite.
Hmm.
So some person will say, well, my blood work is that, my BUN, or my blood urea nitrogen, was a little high on the higher protein, or my GFR, glomerular filtration rate, looking at the kidneys, a little high. Well, actually, that's normal, in the presence of higher protein intake. And we also know that, the body is the body. We had talked a while back about tissues are tissues. So you actually, a high protein diet, your organs get bigger. They get
Hmm.
bigger and stronger and more efficient. And so that's really interesting. They'll sometimes look at creatinine, which actually is probably a more valuable marker when we're looking at overall kidney health as far as function goes. But anyway, I almost rabbit holed there, and I didn't mean to. The other thing is, like, there's some studies about longevity, and if you overeat protein, it overstimulates the mechanistic target of rapamycin, also known as mTOR. A couple big problems with that data is some of the statements made based on the data are a bit inconclusive, in that most of those studies are done with mouse models, and so,
Mm.
yeah, we may have a 92% or so DNA share with mice, but they're they're not humans. And so we do have to be a little bit skeptical about that information. And also, within the body, uh, triggers vary in different tissues. And so, in other words, eating protein is very valuable for the muscle, but it is actually not so deleterious as was thought for other organs or capacity. So anyway, I went further than I needed to, but basically, eat a gram per pound of body weight, and it's good for you. And again, the flag's in the ground, stabbed in by experience and opinion, but it's well supported by research.
Absolutely. Well, I love that. Well, let's take it on home then. What's number 4 of 4 on this list?
Oh,
What's the fourth big rock?
if I may, and so
Yes.
rock four is, I'm about to leap from 3 to 4, but still standing on 4,
Ooh, ooh.
crossing the rapids. Um, Got to say something about animal sourced protein,
Oh, gotcha.
and it's really this, that animal protein has been definitively, undeniably shown by research to be more bioavailable, or able to utilize as a nutrient in a human, than plant protein. and more nutrient dense or rich. That is indisputable. So I want to put that out as a fact. Now I will say this: some people are still going to say, I don't want to source my protein from animal
Mhm.
products. I've got different reasons for that, and so I want to. I'm going to utilize plant protein, and I say,
Mhm.
okay. But because of the reduced bioavailability or assimilability of that protein, you have to eat more of it. And that's really the only point. So if a vegan says, I'm going to use powders, which are actually processed foods. So let's be careful with how many powders we use. But I'm going to use uh, pea, hemp, rice, protein. Hopefully not soy. It's just so filled with those phytoestrogens. But um, I'm going to say, okay, well, just realize that if you put a couple scoops in your smoothie and it says you're getting 25 grams, that's a lab analysis, but your body probably is only going to extract 15 of it. And so if you
Mm.
need a 30-gram bolus to stimulate optimal muscle protein synthesis, you're going to have to double it. And so then we start getting into, okay, how's your absorption? How's your digestion? What's your caloric load? So just know those things. That's all I'm saying.
And John, that's that again, science and common sense just colliding, making a big clap there. And I think it's just, if that's the path that you're on, just know that to get the enough of the pro, you're going to have to really be deliberate about it. And I think that um, that's great advice.
So you said clap, and you made me think of Eric Clapton right away. And it's like, it's in the way that you use it. And that was a great song. What was that? I think it was
Is that
Color.
him?
Yeah, that was a Clapton song, and it was
Really?
Tom Cruise and Paul Newman were in that movie.
Oh,
But
cocktail? Or
well,
no, Color of Money?
yeah, that's the one. It was the
Yeah.
theme song to that, and that's true with protein. It's in the way that you use it. So, hey, thanks for queuing me up, buddy.
Yeah. All right.
Uh,
Okay, let's talk about sleep.
I was told yesterday that there's not enough singing on this show, and so we're
Really?
we're bringing it back, man. Okay, so
Mm.
sleep. This one is. I'm amazed that we have to have this conversation. I'm also pleased that we are getting to have that conversation because sleep is the most natural and powerful recovery tool that we have before any and all of these gimmicks. And so, you can do things like wear your compression socks and take a sauna and use certain supplements and those things have a place, but they're not nearly as valuable as sleep, and they don't even work that well if you're not sleeping.
Right. It's kind of uh it's just playing the hits, play the hits, the most natural and powerful recovery tool. So
Yeah.
if you don't start there, then you're just not getting what are you getting if you're sleeping right?
Well, if you're sleeping right, this is the way I like to say it. It makes training take and it makes diet stick. So,
Hmm.
because sleep is when we, restore and repair our tissues and we reset our metabolisms, then everything happens. The body responds to the training stimuli, it creates the adaptations. We burn the right fuels, we optimize the body composition. We balance out the hormones. So, things, the adrenals and the thyroid, and everybody's happy. That's really what happens when we sleep, and it won't happen if we don't.
Well, I mean, John, succinct, beautiful.
So if I go like I want to change corporate marketing forever because everybody recognizes just do it, and certainly it referred to getting your workout in, or going for the goal, or the sports model. We know this. Really, it should have been regarding sleep. Just sleep. It's probably the best statement out there. Get your 7.5 plus hours high quality sleep per night, and just tear it up.
I feel like the the necessity of sleep and the drive of some of the self promoters and athletes and business people, and that whole like, I sleep 2 hours a night, I when I still will hear that in 2020, I slept a couple hours a night and he was so driven, he or she. And it's part of the culture is that you can skip it. If you need to sleep more, then it's almost a sign of weakness as compared to the really motivated folks who just say, I need to get more stuff done, so I'm not going to sleep. And that is just, you can't, I guess, negotiate with your body about the importance of sleep, just like we can't negotiate, like a vehicle can't say, well, I'll just take, you know, 10 gallons instead of 20, to fill up all the way. It's just empirical.
Yeah, so summing it up, if you want to be healthy, high performing, and long lasting, take sleep and treasure it, value it, propagate it, celebrate it, protect it.
Mm, I wrote all those down. Beautiful.
That was a
John
roundhouse kick to
Boy.
the face, man.
Yeah, it's in the way that you use it, really. Well, take it home. What are the key take home messages today from our show?
Just like Ronnie sang, "Be my little baby." I don't know how many times I've done that, but who can,
Why
Eddie
stop?
Money, man, love you, baby. So these recommendations are the basics. So they're evolutionarily consistent, and science proven. And so obviously, I'm energized about that. It's probably related to the coffee, but there's passion there, and so that I'll never apologize for being passionate about this because I care and want to help you. But you have to experiment. Experiment with workouts that work for you, and obviously, good coaching comes into that. Diets that fit your lifestyle and your genetics and your palate and all those things. I mean, there is no one right way, but you really have to work at finding the one best way for yourself. But if we go back to um, lift, sprint, eat, and sleep, or whatever the order, I think that was correct. Um, do these things first, and you're much of the way there in getting towards your peak performances that everyone deserves to have, because these are the bedrocks. And there's always a balance and a give and take. And this is maybe we dive into this. More training usually means more sleep and more food.
Yeah, right.
So again, just as a reminder to folks, gosh, sometimes you get into this thing. I've got my, my set isocaloric target that I'm hitting, and I've got, this is when I go to bed and this is when I get up. But all of a sudden, I just started to crush a few more workouts. Well, the body will really benefit from. Oh, let's get a little bit more sleep, or stick in a nap, or let's get a little more food of certain types. And if you go long enough, it'll demand it. But sometimes I think being a very intuitive, having your instinctive wisdom dialed up as an athlete, you can do that before you get the signal, and the benefits are potentially greater.
That is dynamite. I like how you tied it all together there, John. How are we going to sign off today? Anything you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I'd love the chance to talk about the Hard to Kill workshop.
Let's hear it.
So the Hard to Kill workshop, as maybe you've been listening and you've heard, is coming up February 29th in beautiful Bozeman, Montana. And it will be helping you to understand the framework of how all these things fit together. So, and more, that we talked about today. Additionally, the Hard to Kill workshop is rich in laboratory experiences, kind of practical, action-oriented things where you learn some key functional components. So it's a one thing. It's one thing to know about these major concepts like we discussed today, but it's really another. It's equally important to understand the mechanics of breathing, posture, hinging, squatting, and gait. This is how you take that information and apply it to your movement and training. So you'll learn the answers to questions like, I got these laid out here. So first of all, how can I breathe to lower my heart rate and blood pressure? How can I use
Right.
breath to lift more weight, move more explosively, or to protect my back? You'll become an expert at this.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Then oftentimes, again, these are FAQs. People will ask in quotations, what is good, quotations, posture? Like, well, okay, ideal, optimal. We'll talk about that. How can I make simple improvements to my posture that will eliminate pain and increase power, my mood, and other people's perceptions of me? Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Why is hinging so important? How do I use this natural movement pattern to be more effective in not just the gym, but in everyday life?
John, we want to be very clear here. We're talking about hinging, not whinging. Whinging is complaining in English terminology. So sorry,
Did I
sorry.
did I say that?
No,
I thought
you clearly said hinging, but
okay.
I just anyway. Sorry to derail, but
No worries, man.
interesting,
There's
interesting.
there's no derail. This locomotive's going to get where it's going, track or none. What's the difference between squatting and hinging? So, in other words, uh, is a squat and a deadlift the same thing? How do I squat effectively depending on my body type and my goals? After the Hard to Kill workshop, no one will tell you that you don't know squat.
Right, right.
Oh man, I've said that I don't know how many thousands of times over 36 years now, but whatever. It's good. And so then I also get these. How is my foot supposed to strike? How is my foot supposed to strike the ground when I'm walking or running? Well, yeah, there's data on that. Can I actually train my gait pattern to improve my foot function,
Hmm.
reduce my risk of injury, and enhance performance? And where do shoes fit into all this? Oh, yes, of course. We're going to address those things as well.
Yes, John, it's going to be a powerhouse. Speaking of powerhouse performance by you on that day, what are the specifics? Where can someone register?
Yeah, and I think it's a we more than it is me. It's a power. It'll be a
Sure,
powerhouse
sure,
performance
sure.
by us, because anyone who's there, and I hope you can make it, are just going to be inspired with wonderful kick-ass mechanisms. So the early bird registration is still open through February 14th. To
Hmm.
reserve your space today, simply go to thelifetimeathlete.com and you'll see Hard to Kill it right at the top. And when you open that up, it gives you lots more information about the workshop that more than I went over right there, and also has the easy link button to register and reserve your space.
Yes, absolutely. Well, John, it's all available. It's all out there, and I appreciate all the insight today. I took some notes myself, as I always do, and I am glad that you boiled it down to four. I can remember those.
Huge pleasure to visit with you today, sir. And to everyone listening, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Have a fantastic day.
Adios.